Good afternoon. My name is Bahman Yazdonfar, and this is Turnaround, the weekly show brought to you by my colleague John Hardy and I to discuss different elements of the human being and when it comes to the interaction in the workplace, in the organization, and so on. In last two episodes, we discussed certain habits of we as the creature of the human being, so to speak, and how these habits manifest themselves in the workplace when it comes to interacting with others. Either they are dealing with their colleagues, with their bosses, or with a loved one. Now, this week we are going to discuss a little bit further and dig a little bit deeper, so to speak, to find out why some of us trying to find let me put it this way, attempt to find the answer beyond our environment or beyond our five senses, for that matter. John, we discussed that off the air a couple days ago. We had 3-4 days ago. We had a debate on that. What is your thoughts about that?
Frankly, I haven't thought about it. But now that you throw up the question,
okay. I mean, what is your thought about what we discuss, and then we get to this question later.
Had I thought about it, this is what I would have likely thought. I think that actually talking about what is right in front of you is one of the most difficult things. It's just like philosophy. It's very easy to discuss things in abstract, everything in theory. Mm-hmm. But to actually just deal with even a single concrete example, if you were to ask most philosophers, most theoreticians, or go to a cafe anywhere in the world and they'll expound theories. But when it actually comes down to a single simple example and how it applies, usually there's no link between it. And I think it's what a lot of us do, or this going into other dimensions and things like that, because we kind of can't deal with life on this dimension.
Well, I mentioned that again off the air to you that one of my difficulties to understand, to accept as a face value different ideas of the so-called New Age the discoveries is not that I disagree with them, is not that I deny that, but I believe in the practicality. Most of the time, first of all, we have five senses, and these senses, each one of them by itself, is a whole globe of understanding that we don't know. We hear things, we see things, we taste things, we smell things, we touch things, but we are not really comprehend most of what we receive through our senses. And if we haven't get to the point of understanding fully or fully comprehend these senses and what we can get out of that, how can we talk about the dimension beyond that? Or I am not saying there is no spiritual, because there is a proverb in a Middle East proverb that it says, whoever attempts to pick up a big rock, this is the sign that he's not going to throw it at you. Because always talking about the grand thing is easier. You can refute that. You can't deny that.
Well, it's like the big idea in business, right?
That is a great example, yes.
So exactly, even to tie it to business, the big idea, the actual big ideas in business are little ideas that grew.
That's correct.
Right?
So or if it is a big idea, you have to start from step one and then
exactly.
Climb up.
Because the whole thing is that it's like life is fractal in the sense that what's true in the big is true in the small in every scale. And if you get ultimately, any big idea has to specifically address the human condition, something that is fundamental, which of course is not really changing. And so it has to actually be able to have that kind of core perception of root itself in the human condition, in which case it works in the small, and because every other situation is the same. So, let's just say any idea, let's just say that's going to work, let's just take an example. What are the basic things that cause people to suffer, right? The loneliness or even most of us, we have food. We have things, it's frustration, it's loneliness, it's pressure, feeling tension, right? So you look at those things, right? And then you take a look at the fact is if you actually are able to address those at all, anywhere, chances are that you can actually do exactly that same thing or a modification of it and multiply it literally billions of times, right? But it has to at least do the one, right? So that if it's not doing the one, if it's not working in the micro, it's a complete waste of time. And we've got so many ideas. And so part of the skill in a way of the players becomes in selling nothing. And one of the best ways to sell nothing is to sell large ideas, which are never testable.
And that comes back to that basic criteria that I just mentioned. You said if let's say if someone is suffering from let's say a simple interaction with a member of family.
Yeah.
Simple interaction, and if they cannot address or dissect why that kind of the suffering happening to them, either, but mostly within themselves, because if you're seeking answer outside of your system is futile attempt in general.
Exactly. Like an example, let's say, especially a member of the family, right? Because this is a recurring thing. So it's like, your relation with your mother, your father, your brother, but let's just say it's with a sibling, so it's less charged. And there's a particular kind of interaction that you have that, each time at Christmas you get into this topic, then they say this,
Thanksgiving
you say that.
is
Thanksgiving where nobody's really giving thanks. There's this kind of loop going on, right? And the thing about it is that, what is it that disinclines most of us to actually stop and look at that loop, step outside of it and say, okay, well, they said this, but what did I say before that? And I think what it is exactly, it's their part in it. And I was thinking, let's say, I remember somebody once said to me is that basically there's two ways to approach life. And it comes down to the simple approach. One is either life happens to you or it happens for you, right? We start in the happening to you. Something happens, it happens to you. That's the simple perspective. It's the go-to, right? But if we can then go to the place, okay, there's a lesson in this, there's something in this. Now, at first we pay lip service to it and say, oh, well, this happened for me. So once again, abstract, you can say, oh, it happened for me. Justification. But the thing is, the next question asks, okay, it happened for me, that's very noble, but specifically, what did you get out of it, right? Because again, this happened for you, which is very nice, and it sounds cool that the person has some sort of spiritual maturity. But it's only when they can specifically describe what was the real lesson that they got out of that event that the for you means anything at all. And in fact, if they can't say that, and they're using this whole expression of, well, I think of life as happening for me, this is the same New Age thing, and they're not able to do that, then now they have the false belief that they're at the higher level, which is actually going to be the thing that stops them from ascending. Is like that line from hockey.
It's like an escape. I'm jumping the other side of the wall, so I then cannot see this side of the wall.
Well, first of all, it's an escape, the motivation.
Yeah.
But what's even worse about it is, I think it was Stephen Hawking who said that the worst, the real, enemy of knowledge is not ignorance; it is the belief that we already know.
No.
Right?
Yes.
It's so much to the point. And this is an example. The real enemy of spiritual ascension is pop spirituality, is people going around thinking that they're on some elevated level. Like expressions will take the high road, or the politically correct of let's just see goodness, for instance. And so therefore, if anybody even poses the idea that evil and good exist independently, which was the old Manichaean view before the Christians, and I think St. Augustine had this dilemma between these two, right?
That is why he put the churches together. People do.
Well, and the thing was, anyway, Christ kind of introduced that there is only. Well, I don't know if it was Christ who just introduced.
No, Saint Augustine. I'm starting the churches to do that.
Well, he became a convert, and at some point, and then he a genius, and he came to this sort of this
gathering of the.
But in his case, he's a philosopher. He comes to it honestly, but this sort of notion that anytime somebody mentions, oh, well, on this plane, there's dark and there's light. And if you come from this perspective where everybody essentially is being raised in that Christian or faux Christian perspective, which is to say that there is only light, and so if there's dark, it's just it's an ignorance, right? That's a very sort of, dangerous kind of trap for people to fall in, because it's a good way of them, in a way, hiding from the darkness inside them.
Or even discard what is possible that they don't know.
Well, yes, it also keeps them in a very little box.
Yeah,
because
but
they're a secure little world, they can pretend that. But the moment, let's just say, and this is why, like an example, I think, of the PTSD syndrome of soldiers who were sent over, let's just say, from Canada over to Serbia or wherever they were sent, I guess, it really doesn't matter where, Afghanistan or Serbia, and you're getting to see these raw, aggressive warrior cultures, in both cases.
And especially from one culture to like a culture shock at the beginning.
Exactly, because these people have been essentially waging war for, thousands of years, and they've stayed in that culture. And in these difficult cultures, and to come from this sort of culture, which has this notion of good, and then when they're confronted with something which just doesn't fit into it, then now they just don't have the mental apparatus to reconcile the two. And so it actually drives them crazy. And as a society, we can't deal with them when they come back, because in a sense, they're now confronted with the madness of this society and its denial.
And now they have the point of the comparison.
Well, now they know, but they sort of don't know, because if they fully knew, they wouldn't be in mental turmoil.
I mean, at least they believe that they know that something else is there.
Something's off.
That is. A couple comments on your statement. You said something happened for you or to you. I go even one step beyond that. But whatever happened to us on a daily basis in life or whatever, I think the proper approach from my perspective is you have to understand what is happening within you.
Well, yes. Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't even focus on what happened to me or for me, because still these two, to me at least, these are the foreign factors. Because you remember a few sessions back where I said, if you tell me something that I don't like, I have to go and I used to go and say, oh, John was a bad person or what happened. And later on I say something wrong was in today's John's experience. And then later on I realized, why did I say that? That is after 2, 4, and you have to go to within. To understand why I am feeling this way, why I'm responding this way, I think people miss that part greatly when they go to that new age kind of spirituality.
And what you're pointing out, which I didn't think of before, is even if we say there are two basic paradigms, there's to you and for you. The transition from the 2 paradigm into the 4 paradigm,
it has to be true within you.
Exactly, because you can't just snap and go. And this is the whole point, is they're looking for this instant, because that's right. It's because it's a false attribution from that statement. You can look at life as either the to you or for you. Now, once you make that statement, the implication is it's like a light switch.
I am out.
Bang.
I am out.
Now I'm out of the to you, I'm into the for you crowd. But what they're not understanding is that to actually get to for you, you have to go exactly through the process that you're talking about. Because it's like, of course we're in to you. But then the question is that a correct perception? As we actually start to doubt our own perception. We actually introduce doubt.
Or overconfident over our perception.
Well, no, we started off as confident, right?
Yeah.
We start off as this is the way it is.
Oh, when we get to the analyze, when we start to doubt it.
That's our opening position. But we actually have to say, what if? And this is interesting too. Because I was thinking, what is versus what if? So when I'm thinking about, let's say, even the 3 types of individuals that I have, like the outsiders, the troopers, the players.
Orientation, right?
Yeah,
yes.
In terms of their social orientation. I'm thinking, if you take a look at, back to your 97%, assuming that the outsiders don't represent more than 5-10% max. If we take a look at the troopers and we look at the players, basically they're in what is. They're not really doubting. They're not actually even engaging in the possibility of what if. That's what's fascinating. So the problem that becomes is that if we talk about the matrix, what they are then is they're basically locked into the conditioning, the genetics, the conditioning that came basically up to the age of 5, boom. So we got this ready product pumped out of
like assembly line
into, let's say, into kindergarten. That thing, which is little unit that's going into kindergarten now.
Yeah, raw plastic went there. Now you have to put the molding.
Basically, all we're doing now in kindergarten onwards is we've already got the thing basically set up, and now we're basically just going to kind of give it specific orientation. We're going to train it this way or that way. And ultimately, it is just a unit, which is going to interact, it's going to do everything in a fairly automatic way. And what's even more brilliant, each unit is going to have the misconception that it's thinking for itself, which is really genius when you think of how it was set up.
Yeah,
like everyone's got that delusion.
It's like when it comes to the electoral process politically, people have this false perception that really their words really matter.
Oh yeah,
which in reality has
one
has
is that
nothing.
they even care. The other was that there's an actual effective difference between the candidates in terms of once they're elected.
No, I'm talking about even voters. They think they have really saying by giving the vote, but in fact, regardless of what they vote or who gets the elected, then the totality of their choice is completely distorted in practice.
Well, yeah, because what happens is exactly, it's like the game is set up on so many different levels that, so that one, they can more or less condition you to go towards one opponent, the red or the blue, right?
As you call it, even like you go to the ice cream store, you think you have a choice, but if the choice is limited,
well, limited
like
also
too. You have chocolate and vanilla.
And let's say there's chocolate and vanilla, and everything basically in your conditioning pushes you towards chocolate. And yes, you effectively could choose vanilla, but why would you? Because it would taste bad to you, right? So, okay, finally you choose chocolate, but even still, exactly,
it's not your choice.
That you think that is meaningful, then you find out that it doesn't matter who. Both of them will still, if there's a war with China, will still do this. Both of them will have the same policies here and there and there. And ultimately, the only difference is the person who gets to build a particular road will be this contractor
instead of that contractor.
Right. So, but effectively on the lower level, no, there is no difference. And what happens is that the distinction, let's say, example between this individual today is that one of the things that I wrote this in the first book is that I think it was the society of complicity and the society of, I forget what I could describe the first one as, but essentially what happens is the first society essentially is kept under pressure, right? The more basic. So what we have is we've conditioned you, but now what happens is even if you get out of line, we've got this hard authority that's going to slap you into line. Yeah? But then they realized, well, it's getting bigger and more complex. So now what we have to do is we invest in conditioning you better, so that now we don't have to actually need that police force to hold you in place.
We use the fear factor
and not even fear. We can basically just use the idea of,
not fear factor from outside, fear creating a fear internally, yes.
Exactly, and even beyond fear, they're creating this complete sense of limitations that don't even exist. So in other words, they place you in a cell. You perceive yourself to be in a cell, but in actual fact, now they've removed the things that can open the door. That cell is open,
but conditioned to that 100 square foot.
Like when they do with a fly in a glass, and it just keeps bouncing until finally it'll stay in the glass, even if you remove the top, right?
No, it is like urbanizing people. Why people don't move from their house for 20, 30 years?
Exactly. So they're habited. So what happens is that they get into this slot. They actually shut down, and that which is thought of as life is not life at all. It's really some kind of almost simple stimulus response circuit, which is not that different. It's funny, as people, if people were to think in terms of watching, let's say, cattle, the way they're raised, and these various animals, which is really heinous, and as much as we think that this is horrific what we do to the animals, which it is.
We do it worse to ourselves, yeah.
We're doing exactly the same to us. Yeah. Exactly. The whole society, essentially, you take a look at, 8 billion people. out of those 8 billion people, each one of those billion is born with the potential.
We are 8 billion. We are just 7. I heard it was 7 billion.
We'll get
so,
there.
Yeah, look,
But
doesn't matter. We are talking about future.
7, 8, yeah, exactly.
We are talking about future.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, we're forward thinking. Exactly. Let's be optimists and say that there's 8. I don't even know if that's pessimist or.
Well,
so
not with the Zika.
so you've got these 8 billion people. Out of these people, each one of those souls is actually born with this incredible potential, really, to actualize, to actually reach, a higher dimension. All of those things exist within each one. And yet, not 1 out of 100,000 of them probably will reach it.
Well, look at
which is fascinating.
I think human beings I mean, you were talking about orientation players and the outsiders and troopers. And look at the troopers, let's say, for the second, which is most of the population in general, in every organization. You see, if you look at the animal kingdom, at least the perception of the human from the other species that are animal kingdom. And then if you want to, let's say, address someone, you say, oh, he's like an alpha dog or alpha person. You say, oh, he's a lion, he's a tiger, he's a fox, he's a wolf. And you categorize them based on certain characteristic attribute of human being. But you don't call people, when you call people donkey, that means... No, just I'm talking about the donkey in the form of the functionality. Immediately you think of a donkey as a mule that carries something. And if you look at the not only in Canada, everywhere in the world, if you look at the large portion of the society, they are donkeys. I am talking about from the functionality purpose. And then if you look at the characteristic of these animals, let's say a donkey and a lion, you see donkey doesn't roar, doesn't attack, is minding his own business. That means if you are a human being minding your own business, you are a decent human being, you are being perceived as an individual or as a species to be subjugated, to be taken advantage of and use you as a just carrier, as a mule.
Basically.
So if you raise your voice,
they say bad donkey.
No, I mean, if you attack and raise your voice, if you cannot deliver what a lion or a fox or a cheetah or a tiger deliver, you will be a bad donkey. If you can't deliver that, then you will be a lion and you're out of the herd.
Then you're a player, exactly. Then you're up above.
So really what we are doing is we in our society, when you say we are doing worse thing to ourselves than animals, and you are correct, because we are saying if you are a decent human being, under any category and pretext, it could be religious, it could be philosophical, it could be social situation, not orientation, or situation. If you are minding your own business, we are going to screw you more.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If you go along, we will.
No, even if you don't go along. I mean, mule has an option to kick back once in a while. Human being, if they kick back, they have done something against the law and they end up in the jail.
Yeah, they have to be disciplined. They have to be trained. And the thing is, all these negative things, and for instance, ultimately, it's inverted exactly. Like the true noble qualities, in a way, are, courage, valor, the original thinking, artistic inspiration, right? And when you look at it, if anybody directly expresses these as an individual, as opposed to being as a proxy for the state, right? Mm-hmm. They basically are shut down so hard and fast that they are considered to be the lowest of the low. Lunatics and, treasonous, like Snowden or someone like that.
Yeah,
exactly. Look at someone like him and everybody's saying,
I go simpler than that. Just look at our society. You, me, X, Y. Doesn't matter. They don't have to shut us down. They don't give us the opportunity that other people could have even. in a sense of the social.
Oh, because they've got so much control.
So much control of the who has saying where and what. It could be economical, it could be social, it could be intellectual. For instance, if you want to go to university and you are 22 years old, and if you have a big mouth, maybe they create some sort of environment you won't be able to get the grant. But the reason, since you brought this up, and I emphasize on understanding self within, it is the only way that you can free yourself. It's not beyond your. I mean, the only way that you can really free yourself and release yourself, at least to some extent, from the chain that your society put on you.
No, you can do it fully. It's difficult, but
it's difficult. But what I'm saying is, but first you have to understand your senses. What I am seeing and what I am watching, what I am hearing and what I am listening. What I am eating, what I am tasting.
Okay, now this is exactly, for instance, exactly when my eye sees this, right? First of all, it's upside down in my head. It's
well, I am watching a movie, but do I see things?
Well, no, exactly, because first of all, it's flipped upside down the way our eyes work.
Either way you want to do it.
But on top of that, too, I think the sense, a seeing, as opposed to all the other senses, is the one that goes through the cortex, right?
Yes.
So what that means is...
And easily it can deceive you.
Well, it means there's interpretation.
Yeah.
That I actually am seeing an interpretation of this.
Yes.
Whether I like it or not.
Yes.
I cannot completely block out the fact that, so that, for an example, I'm seeing a mug. The mug has a shape. It's got this Raiders Ross Public School on it, right? Now, there's a coat of arms, and then there looks like a Viking helmet, right? Helmet. Now, each one of the things in those is a symbol, or some of them are symbols, but other can be symbolic. Each one has a value. Each one has associations in my head, right?
Of course.
So what's happening now is in my cortex, there's these millions of synapses firing just all over the place, creating all these associations. And so even though I'm thinking I'm just looking at a mug, there's no way that I'm looking at this mug and I'm actually seeing the same thing as you are, right?
No.
Exactly. So the huge challenge then is that we can't even see accurately, but we can at least try to see more accurately, right?
Yes.
So we have to go through this whole
process of the internalization to find out really
what is actually in front of our nose.
I give you a better example. I mean, not better. I mean, a further example. If you had 2 days ago, you had something in that mug, and that was had a bad taste in your mouth,
exactly.
And today it's the same mug washed and has a water in it, like it has right now. How much of the hesitation do you have to pick up that mug without knowing it? But if you know yourself, and then you say, okay, this mug is already washed, therefore that has no connotation in my behavior.
And you know what's but even still, and this is what's also interesting about the mind, is that there's the unconscious and then there's the conscious, right? So that the conscious part of the mind can actually make that, but the unconscious associations that have already been made with that. I cannot undo, I cannot extinguish nearly so easily. Just the fact of knowing it consciously will not. And this is one of the reasons why mind control and propaganda are so effective.
Of course.
Is because the associations that are made on the unconscious mind, even if we know that they're doing it to us,
it's an anchor.
It's anchoring. It's still happening.
It's anchoring in your mind. That is why I believe
neurolinguistic programming looks at that and everything. And of course,
no, I mean in advertising, it has been around for the last 100 years.
It's the basis of advertising.
And subliminal messaging have been in the advertising. Right. I studied advertising years back in part of my courses, and I know how, for instance, the shape of a glass of the liquor or whiskey on the billboard has has the outline of the naked lady, for instance, in it, in the ice. So they put all of that.
So unconsciously, there's an association between liquor,
you are looking
sex,
at it, maybe, but subconsciously, when you go to the liquor store, you buy that brand because it triggers your sexual appetite, for instance. But that is why my emphasis a couple of shows ago we did discuss about what I did with the metacentration and how I came about that. It was this, to separate the facts and figures and at least to some extent the reality that it should be from the reality that is being presented and misconception, and is not being done through the just jumping over the bar of the spirituality, like some people suggest, at least from my perspective.
Well, and also, when you embark on this, you immediately set yourself, well, and I guess it's a chicken and egg. When you embark on this, I think that, and where would you stand on this? Those who embark on it, are they doing it by choice or by compulsion, by their nature?
It is I think it is you know, let me put it this way. I think the combination of both, but the way that I have seen them, and I spoke to many of them, I think they are more of the hunter than trapper. They want to get the final answer. They are not willing to go. It's like you want a lamb, you just go to supermarket, get a package. But if I tell you, well, if you want a lamb, you go to the farm, and you have to go to the farm, get the lamb, and then you slaughter the lamb, and then take the skin off, clean the inside out, and get the meat, probably you wouldn't. So what I am seeing, those
I don't like lamb that much.
Or if you like that lamb, you have to go through the process, and probably the taste at the end may be better or worse, depending on what kind of the journey you had. Maybe you didn't like the blood. Maybe you enjoy the effort you put on. That is up to you. But just going to the supermarket, getting the lamb, and coming back and said, I had a lamb, without knowing where it come from, how it's being done, where was it delivered from where, and what kind of a chemical it has, it doesn't. So jumping over the loop to a spirituality just because someone else told me so.
Well, it's interesting you describe with lambs. We were talking about with my friend with pork yesterday. In the morning we were discussing veal, and he was just sharing a story about
the same process of the wheel.
Well, just about how a company that he was actually dealing with on some other item, it was producing a plastic, agricultural plastic, and again, agricultural plastic, okay, it's fine, what is that? Turns out what is the major use for this agricultural plastic is that the veal, the young calf, as soon as it's born, they're basically put outside in the field underneath this plastic container, and that's where they live, essentially for the most part, if I understood it correctly, until they die, right? Now, horrific.
What is that for? Why they want to kill the animal?
No, for calves, right? So they separate the calf from the mother.
Okay.
And they just got to keep it around, and they just keep it, outside in these little plastic containers, and essentially like lids, and then basically, for a few months, and then they're ready to kill, right?
Oh, ready to kill.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it is being killed under there. I said, what is it?
No.
Okay.
So here I was at, just like a couple of blocks up, we have a place where they have veal sandwiches where we've gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, I had that experience. I compartmentalized
After
it.
conversation?
Yeah, no, but I compartmentalized. So, okay, fine, I had the experience, and we were talking about it. So then I go to this place, and this is a place which sells pizza and is well known for veal sandwiches, right? And because I was just here yesterday, and I thought, okay, well, I'll go for a veal sandwich, right? There was no connection in my mind between that conversation. So then I'm having this veal sandwich. And then as I'm having the veal sandwich,
conversation pops.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you, it certainly spoiled it. That was it. I didn't even get through half. And now I'm thinking to myself, okay, you idiot, you screwed up dinner. I'm not going to go somewhere else. It's so cold outside. So I'm not going to have, but I can have the second half. But at the same time, too, what am I going to do? And I'm going through this kind of, idiotic, sort of, Dane Andrews kind of moment, right? But anyways, okay, I just wrapped it. I figured, you know what? Don't even think about it. Just stop now, wrap it, throw it out, right?
Or take it with you maybe later on.
That's you. You see, you're ever the pragmatist.
Or give it someone else.
Actually, you know what the joke was? I ended up giving $10 to which I don't normally do. I saw this guy. I've just done this. What I end up doing is in the subway, I go past, I don't know, any number of times. Like, there's a guy who's sitting there in College Street. Like in the subway underneath there,
yes.
There's always somebody begging, and they're sort of.
You could give them a sandwich to it.
No, I did something else because I figured that no, but I happened to pass by him. So he was there. Okay, I gave him $1, right? So okay, whatever. I go. His thing's empty, and it was so cold outside last night, and I just come in from that cold. So then I walk past, another 20 feet, and I just look at it, and I go back and I give him $10. And what I was thinking to myself, it's just so cold out here. This guy should just get himself a meal. And sure enough, the guy said, literally, I gave him the 10, he looks at me, and then he gets up, and he said, I'm going to go and grab something to eat, which is exactly what was in my head.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying, it was so strange. It's not like, I don't know how many times I passed these people at the thing, right? But maybe what was triggered was because I'm now thinking about the veal. Then I start to think about. So what I'm saying is, it's
all
like
of the synapses are connecting between the wheel, eating, guilty, victimization. All of that comes to the pot.
It's all starting to set up, right?
Yes.
But this is the whole, I guess, in a way, the process of coming into awareness, right? It's not this feeling of, if I was a good person and thinking, this nonsensical ego. I didn't do it to feel better about myself. It's this moment where you feel compelled, where you just are compelled at that moment. There's something that grabs you, and then sure enough, there was an appropriateness to it because he ended up having the exact reaction that I had in my head that I wanted, right? Which also kind of tells you that there was a point to this. It almost kind of finishes, it's not by accident that it's happened. And I'm thinking that this kind of moment, nothing special, not in big euphoria, but in a way, this is the possibility for all of us all the time. And the fact is, this is not the first time I heard the story about veal. Right? So, I mean, I don't know how long ago I heard about veal. I definitely, if I stopped and thought about it, well, how are veal really raised, right? But I'm not having that when I'm having a great veal chop and everything like that, thinking about that. But for whatever reason it was, this time it twigged. But now that it's twigged, it's changed. I'm not going to be able to go and have that veal sandwich again, the same way. So, my good friend Pork ruined veal for me for life.
Well, the chicken, you're going to the chicken.
No, exactly. I don't switch to chicken.
So we are waiting for another story for the chicken.
No, but I want a certificate that this animal was talked to appropriately until the day it died.
Like one of the stores that they're doing
and
that.
caressed, and when they had conversations. But this is the other problem, is that when we become consequent, right? You're now cast into this thing of, oh my God. Like the whole thing is you're cast in the midst of all this madness. Okay, if it's not going to be then it's going to be, well, shrimp is not so bad because, they're floating around in the sea until we grab them. But, fish,
again comes actually justification.
And again, if you happen to be that shrimp that's chosen, I'm sure you're not feeling too happy about it either.
You would be very upset that they were, why me?
Precisely, unless he'd taken your course, in which case the shrimp will have a sense of perspective.
and they don't have any justice if the
and I've had no conversations with shrimp. So it could be the shrimp would be major applicants for your, you've actually been saying, you've been going after the wrong audience. I think shrimp would definitely like what you're saying.
And the serious note about what you just described, if you had, because of the previous conversation, not particularly the one yesterday you had about the wheel, if you had that experience of the analyzing what you discussed, let's say a year ago or 2 years ago about the wheel, and internalize it at that moment,
and this is
already you decide, you resolve it, put it on the shelf, and it's already there.
No, and this is just it. So what is it that's taking place exactly that's stopping? Because just like in myself, okay, how many times I had that knowledge. Everybody, if they were having a veal, right, and they were then, good, bad, or otherwise, players, troopers, outsiders, I don't care what, if they're having their veal dinner, and then on the screen there is a detailed documentary describing the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very few of them would be able to actually get the meal down, right? Oh, I would say the small minority. Right?
If it is at the same time,
unless
yes,
you're
yes,
really
of course.
good, true psychopath.
Actually, I think the vegans should try that process if they can.
But and I was thinking, but the thing is, we don't know that. No, it's not that we don't know. It's that we are allowed to suppress it. We are allowed to distract ourselves. And I was thinking, this is what's so cleverly done in society. It's like we want to be distracted, and they do it for us, right?
Well, I give you the better example when it comes to the interaction of the people. Let's say if we were talking about that people, you were talking about the Thanksgiving or Christmas gathering of the families. You are sitting with your brother, sister, father, brother, mother, whoever,
the gang,
and what it happens is someone says something or you say something, and the other person start to continue and escalate the issue to another level, and then actually it happened to me just recently with one of my friends that I say something by myself. I am blunt. I say as is everything, and my friend started to complain that that is come across offensive. So now the issue of the offensiveness and like I wrote an article recently, which again we discussed the other night, that about these small groups of the people politically, or they call themselves social justice warrior kind of thing, and they choose or they get something like cause. Either they get money out of that or they don't, or get satisfaction out of that or not. But what they are trying to say to the rest of society is, you stop doing what you're doing because what you do affects us. And how it affects us, not physically, not financially, not socially, but it hurts our feelings. Now, my question comes back again, always I dispute that with anyone who addressed that directly to me, and that is, you are expecting me that I put extra effort in my mental activity as well as physical activity to control myself in order to avoid the possibility of hurting your feelings. And that by itself is illogical to me, and you know that I go by the logic because I examine everything separately, individually.
Yeah, exactly.
And why it is for me is illogical is not the issue of the human interaction. I met you last year. You are 57 years old, I believe, 57, 58, okay. So I met you when you were 56. Do I have a chronological history of what happened to you in 56 years? Have you provided me a list or send me a memo, a list of the things that offends you?
Maybe we should actually devise such a system.
When
When
you were talking,
send it
and the issue is when you leave. In my sales training, I used to say one of the items of the menu of the failure is paralyzing the analyzers.
Paralysis through analysis.
Paralyzing your analyzers. So people who forget themselves, leave the what happening within them outside, and jumping over the hoop and advocating something without knowing themselves, they are more in danger than someone like me that put everything the way it is.
Well, they're really, it's a kind of narcissism. It's like it's expecting the other.
And they call us narcissists.
Yes, no, exactly.
That is the double whammy, actually.
It's a very interesting, exactly. It's where the individual within the crowd, it's the narcissistic crowd. It's where almost the crowd collectively, as a group, as an entity, now becomes like a large narcissist. And ironically, is posing itself to be the opposite.
Yes.
In this moral superiority, and this is just it. It's this desire to feel superior.
And the reason they are able to move that.
Nietzsche talks a lot about this. Interestingly, exactly this phenomenon, which is fascinating. He singles this out in his genealogy of morality, I think. And what's fascinating is what he was describing then, now is literally, expanded to take over the entire society.
It
that was 150 years ago.
Actually, we earlier our discussion just this afternoon, you just mentioned that the beauty of the controlling people is that they don't have to control you individually. They just put you in that. And
they get the crowd to control you.
And the reason this crowd can survive is because it's a crowd. It's like a gang. If they are all together walking on the street, they are a formidable group, at least for some people. But if individually walk down on the street and confront one of their enemies.
Well, it's interesting. It's just like, for instance, when you encounter, let's say, teenagers, and you encounter the teenager. Well, let's say even with my little girl, who's 12 now and just becoming a teenager, I was thinking, if I were to encounter her with her friends now, this wasn't before, but now that she's becoming a teenager, versus, when I'm by myself, she's my baby girl, right? Nothing's changed since she was 2. In that relation, but the moment that she's in the
company of the group,
now I'm starting to find that's changing a bit. But especially when she's annoyed at me, and she's not getting what she wants. But the thing about it is that once she let's say, if she was in the group, and that public self is there, it's like that public self is almost another entity. It's like it's an aspect of the self. It's somehow related to her. But it's just this thin sliver, but that thin sliver of herself, including, and the same would go for her friends, now essentially occupies the whole self. It's this rigid, and it's not the best part.
It's a plate change. It's a plate change. The moment you said teenagers, they have these cell phones, and they keep going there and get one of these red, blue. That is the plate change. That is the play, Jim. I am with my friends. That is the play. That is the face.
Exactly. And now it becomes that, and that to challenge that, now I'm actually dealing with the collective. I'm not even dealing with her individually.
No.
Which, is really sobering. And I think this is one of the things that parents have such a hard time understanding and dealing with, because they say, oh my God, they've changed. Well, they were the same when they were children, because this is actually natural behavior. And unless you are going through a process like the one we're talking about, which, typically you're not going to go through at that age, that is
the part of you have to go through that age.
You almost have to lose yourself to get back yourself
and
back.
not only that, you have to experience different things. The problem that I see, when people reach to the age of, let's say, 25, 26, 27, even 30, let's say early 30s, they have enough information to go and evaluate. They chose not to.
Yeah, to basically
they choose not.
Down.
I was a teenager once, and I know that, and I vividly remember if my parents start to say something, criticize a friend of mine, I would have been very defiant of I'm defiant to my parents, which I lived with them for 14 years, to defend my friend that I know him for 6 months, let's say.
Yeah,
that is the process. I don't have any problem. It is the process that we all go through.
It's a growing,
But this process for most people stops at one point. I had a saying. I developed a kind of a very rather. It seems to be very idiotic. I said, it is the fist. This small finger that represents our ideology when we were born with our family, and then this creates our belief system when we get up to the age of 13, 14, and then by the late teenage or early, because we have belief, we have ideology, we develop opinion, and then when we get older, we start to support our opinion, to say we are right. We gather information as much as we can to do that. And then the last finger is when we use that information to become a knowledge. So in order to have fist, you have to have all of that 5. But most people don't use that. They get to the part of the information, they stop using the information to make it knowledge. For instance, someone probably knows everything about hockey, but he's not using it to make, let's say, living out of the hockey or anything. That is just information. I don't consider that knowledge. You can talk about hockey all you want, but if you cannot use it in a productive way somehow, it cannot be knowledge. It is just information.
That's an interesting distinction. I'm just thinking,
And I used to, in politics, I used to say, unfortunately, our politicians only use their opinion, which is the middle finger, coincidentally. So they give their middle finger to the public when they are getting elected. They just opinion.
Well, there isn't the weight behind it. I think that's the other thing which is interesting now, too. I mean, I think back, let's just say, in the Middle Ages, right? If you said something, you spoke out of turn, or you said some slight, that was it. There was no way to take back what you said.
You had to,
it was life and death.
To stick with that.
You had to stick with it. So therefore, before you spoke, you develop
yes.
a lot of thinking. You wouldn't just talk, right? Whereas now with this whole freedom of expression, there's a downside to it. There's this sort of unbearable lightness of being effect that it just spews out, and we can just talk and talk. I mean, all of us, and there's no kind of weight to it. There's no substance to it. So finally, everybody's speaking, everybody's making statements, and then they're making statements, right? They're making commitments, statements, and we're all doing this, and everything then becomes devalued.
I think the freedom of expression and freedom of speech, if it's being practiced fully, it's not like that.
The abuse of the freedom.
Yeah, abuse of that. Yes, you mentioned just earlier about the Saint Augustine that bringing people to the light and forget about dark. The problem with the abuse of freedom of speech is not too much talk. It's just stifling other side not to talk, therefore not to know. So putting a certain segment of the society in any given society, it could be North American this way, or if you go to Middle East in the other way, to put, okay, thou shall not talk about this. That means we are pushing a lot of problem issues into the dark. So if we do not know what is in the dark, what kind of the beast sitting in the dark, you can be in middle of the light as much as you want. If the beast attack you, you don't know about its existence or its nature, do you?
Exactly.
So freedom of speech here is being abused because some sort of the dogma elements and its elements, like social justice warrior kind of thing we discussed, just push something into the throat of the people that is the way you should talk. So all of your thoughts sits there. And
exactly.
And if you put even water, fresh water, put it in this glass and leave it for 1 month, come back, it stinks. When you keep the thoughts inside your brain, you create a swamp. And that swamp comes back one way or another into the society.
Well, I think one example of this stench is the mutual admiration society effect.
That means I look at you as you're wonderful, and you tell me wonderful, but if I go home and say what kind of a jackass was he, that is okay.
And we are in connection only so long as we each give a positive mirror to each other. The
perception of the being connected.
The moment that there's anything even slightly off from that, right? Everybody implicitly knows that the moment they would even say something authentic, even if it's not, just not particularly flattering at that moment, that would be enough to break this so-called friendship, right? And so that means that everybody kind of is on this crust level. So my friendships, my relationships, everything works so long as
we keep these parameters. We keep these boundaries. The moment I get above these boundaries, either I am rude, I am insensitive, or all sorts of other labels. Or if I come down, if I don't do that, I am inconsiderate, I am insensitive, and so on.
And so the freedom then becomes to move along the crust. We can go anywhere along the crust.
Yeah.
Keep it light.
And unfortunately, this crust getting thinner and thinner.
Oh yeah.
Is
almost transparent.
If it is thick enough, you said old days we used to talk, we used to stand by that because it was thicker. And I think that is by design to Chris, how are you? Okay, how we design our society based on the requirement or the predisposition of the certain group of people, mainly in the power.
Yeah.
That they want to make this actually you mentioned the other night about
but I don't think they are making that decision. I think they're
they started from one level, and this level I don't
think anybody explicitly says we're going to do that. It's maybe there is such a thing happening, but it's only on a very, very high level. Generally speaking, everybody who we see, politicians, they're just part of this machine that's doing it.
It's not sometimes when I say that and people who some people, when we get to the debate, they say, oh, are you suggesting that some people sitting in the boardroom and making this? I said, no. But it's just it starts from one group trying to get their own profit or benefit from the rest of society by exploiting a certain group of the society. Another group is there, and gradually this thing manifests itself.
But I think on a highest level, there is something like this going on, but it's not going on in that way, in the sense that it's just like a merry-go-round. All I have to do, if the wheel is really good and set, all I have to do is just flick it. It goes, and now it's spinning. Mm-hmm. And all I have to do is to make sure that nothing gets in the way of it keeping spinning, and just spin a little bit here, a little bit there. But once it's spun, and because this wheel has been set in motion so long ago, all these people have to do is just, and in a sense, that's what they're doing. So on the highest level, these people are aware of this wheel. I would say they are. And they're supreme cynics, and it says, basically, you know what? This wheel works. Let it run.
Yes, don't rock this boat.
It works for us.
Yes, for those who
like
works,
the Madoffs, the people like that. It works.
And even further, they transform this kind of the ideology that sentiment to the crowd. That troopers, that the mass crowd, that listen, this system, it works, and don't change it under the different
otherwise
pretext.
And one of the pretexts is this implicit fear of chaos.
Or it is the way our lifestyle. Or you suggested a movie called V for Vendetta. I watched it the other night, 2 nights ago. Actually, we rented. I actually borrowed it from the library, and I watched it. Exactly, it was the same setup that we are just talking about. I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the movie by itself. I'm talking about the principle of the movie. To get to the point of the having a tyranny government in one environment that creates some sort of the fear in a form that. And whenever they wanted to stop this terrorist, the guy comes or the head of the state comes and say, there are terrorists that they are threatening our lifestyle, our way of living, they are threat to our society.
Exactly. But the implicit thing, which is not stated, is the thing that we all fear is disorder, right? Mm-hmm. This randomness. And part of it is, what are they afraid of? Is having to think for themselves. An interesting thing is this disinclination.
Independent thinkers should wipe out.
But also the average individual, I would say, I've just experienced, and I guess this is coming from the philosopher's point of view in sort of a kind of complete amazement, is the lengths that people will go to avoid actually thinking for themselves is extraordinary. And that's what makes it easy for them to spin the wheel.
The lengths the people go to avoid it. Yes.
No,
yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
They will do anything.
Yes.
So therefore, spinning this wheel, it just takes a little bit of energy to run it.
Of course, and just you mentioned about the cross. The danger about that cross is you can thin it is like a lens. You can shave off the layer so much it gets to the point that it breaks.
So I'm just wondering,
and when you were talking about the spiritual thing actually 3 or 4 sessions ago, that we are all moving to the kind of the Aquarius age, where there is a collective changes is happening. That layer, maybe not in our lifetime, but it's going to break.
Well, and this is it exactly. As this thing shifts, as this thing goes, as we are going into this phase, we don't know when it could be. I mean, exactly, this could be like 6 million phase, in which case 100 years here or there, who knows? But as it's going to that place, the point is the individual will really be thrown into that situation where they have to look to themselves and do that your process, my process, or some
Any
sort
process
of, they'll have no choice but to go towards an internal process to navigate everything that's going around, because all the markers essentially will become useless.
Of course.
And I think we're already in that phase. The beginning of the phase has already begun.
But I don't think. The collective phase of the human consciousness moves toward that way, but very slowly, because when it comes to the individual level, still we have that most of the people in that mule level.
Well, we still have people buying Jordan shoes for some crazy number. Yeah.
Or the guy who goes and put it in the Kijiji and then rob people, like we had it last week.
Well, at least he's enterprising.
Yeah, that was. Anything else for the end?
No, that's it.
Okay.
To be continued.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this series of the conversation has just begun, and we are going to continue. Please visit us or tune in next week, same place, same time. Thank you very much. Good night.
Got my city, got my sin, got my baby, I'm rolling in. Well, she's gone on high.